Continuing on with Month of Edge 3, we have Manhunt, released for the PS2 in 2003. Developed by Rockstar Games, it is one of the most infamous games ever released and is often considered one of the most violent video games of all time. Sounds perfect for Month of Edge. The game was banned in many countries when it was released and is part of what is probably Rockstar's most controversial game series. The game was used to fuel the fire that video games were making the children violent and all that crap. But reviewers and gamers actually liked it. They liked how unique it was, the atmosphere that it brought to the table. But anyway, that was then and this is now. The future is now, old man. Here we are 17 years later in 2020. And is this game as violent as people said it was? Has the violence held up? Has the game even held up? Let's just see. Manhunt stars James Cash as the protagonist. I say protagonist, but this is not a good dude, not at all. At the beginning of the game, he is on death row and is executed by a lethal syringe. Well, he wakes up a bit after to find out that it was just a sedative. Cash then sees an earpiece and puts it on. He is greeted to a man known as the Director. This Director then tells Cash that he will grant him his freedom if he does exactly what he tells him. Well, what this Director is Cash doing is killing these awful people and these awful gangs and just real scum of the earth. We're talking white supremacists, cartel members, mercenaries, even like pedophiles. Some of the most scum human beings you'll ever see in a video game. And that is the general setup of Manhunt, is to do what the Director tells you and kill this actual human filth as he records it and makes it a snuff film. For the one person watching the video who doesn't know what a snuff film is, basically it's where you film a movie about people getting killed, and yeah, when they get killed on screen, they're getting killed in real life. It's pretty horrible. So the Director has hired a number of different groups of people to try and kill Cash, and it's up to Cash to just do whatever the Director says. I mean, Cash doesn't really have a choice. That's all I'm going to say for the plot in this review, as I actually think the plot is really well done. I think the setup, the characters, the general world of Manhunt, how the game progresses is extremely well done. I would go as far as to say it's an underrated part of the game. The general setup is just extremely unique. There has never been anything like this in a video game before and since. It's just extremely messed up, but it is just as captivating, like a car crash. You have to look at it. Let me explain. The way the game begins is just excellent, as I feel it sets up Cash perfectly. He's not a good guy. He is also human filth. I mean, he gets executed, or well, he's about to be executed at the beginning of the game, so obviously he did do something terrible. They don't try to make you sympathize with him or care about him. You know this guy is human garbage as well. In terms of having any character, Cash doesn't really have any at all, but he doesn't speak a bunch, and really, he doesn't have much character development. He doesn't need it. He's just doing what he's told because he doesn't have a choice, and then when he finally can make a choice later, he definitely makes the right choice. I'll leave it at that. There doesn't need to be character development with him. There's also the journalist, and while she might be a bit underdeveloped, she still has a role as well. The only other real character in the game is the main antagonist, the Director. Now, while Cash might be messed up, and while the people he is killing might be pretty damn messed up, the Director is easily the worst of them all. This dude talks to you for almost the entire game, not only telling you what to do, but commenting on everything you've done in the game. It gives the character depth. It really just fleshes him out. Like, this is one sick fuck. There is no other way to say it, as he has basically turned part of the city into a snuff film set, but this dude totally gets off to it. He very clearly enjoys what he's seeing, and he'll even yell at you to be gorier and more violent. You really come to hate this asshole, and he's just playing with you the whole time. You really just want him to meet his maker, and you want to blow his brains out, but that's just what makes him such a great antagonist, is you really come to hate this dude as he watches you and talks to you for almost the entire game. He's really the star of the show, and has way more development than any of the other characters combined, and by that I mean Cash and the journalist. You learn how he went from being just a regular director to making porn to eventually losing his mind and making these snuff films. Everything about him is fantastic in like the worst possible way. In terms of the gangs you fight in this game, these guys are they're also awful. Like I said, they're usually hate groups or something terrible, but they really enhance the atmosphere of this game and really put you in this messed up situation. Speaking of the atmosphere, the general world of Manhunt is just excellent, like in the most disturbing way. The amount of dread and just how tense I felt the entire game is a testament to the atmosphere that is created with Manhunt. It's dark, it's gritty, and it's shitty. You really feel like you're in this dystopian city killing these people because that's the only choice you have. It just gives off a fantastic atmosphere, and you feel a sense of just disgust with everything going on. There is also this sense of fear for a majority of the game, as these are just awful human beings trying to kill you, and you have to sneak around them. There's really nothing else like it, and I think the atmosphere is very powerful. It's one of the most powerful atmospheres on the PS2. The way the game progresses in the story department is a bit predictable, and it really does open up all these conspiracies, which is nice, but the general plot is pretty predictable, I will say. There are a couple interesting plot points, but they really don't mean that much in the end. But I think it's okay because the world is interesting. It is definitely interesting. I really liked how the game progressed, and I gotta say I thoroughly enjoyed the ending and thought it was a fitting end. Overall, I just think when it comes to the story, characters, and again, that atmosphere, I just think it's excellent. Sure, it's not the most in-depth, it's not going to make you indulge in a bunch of critical thinking or anything. I mean, I still will. But I think it'll resonate with you, and I just think that there's never been a game like this that's given me this feeling, and there's probably not ever going to be a game since that'll give me this feeling. I mean, you're literally participating in a snuff film. You got to be pretty sick to come up with this stuff. The game just feels like a horror slasher movie, and that is certainly to its benefit. Anyway, we've been talking about the story for like 5 minutes now. That's enough. I think it's time to talk about what makes Manhunt so controversial. You know, the actual gameplay.
That was one killer shot. Attaboy.
Manhunt is a third-person stealth horror game with shooting aspects. I think before we go into what you're doing in the game, hunting man, we should first go over what Cash can do. He's not a superhero and can't do anything crazy, but what he can do is fairly basic. Cash can of course walk, and this is a generally slow pace, but you are totally silent when you walk. You can also run, where you're significantly faster but make a lot more noise when you run. And in addition to this, you actually have a stamina bar for running. It's next to the health bar, bottom right. Cash can also take cover behind almost anything in the game. Walls, crates, barrels, knocked over stuff. You can take cover behind basically everything with the press of a button. While taking cover, you can even look out to the side, depending on what it is. That's what Cash can do on his own, but then we have the weapons. Scattered throughout the game are weapons, of course. Whether you find them in the environment or take them from an enemy's corpse, there are a variety of weapons to use in the game. Now when Cash is behind someone, he can perform an execution. Depending on how long you hold the execution button, the gorier and more gruesome the kill. But you have to have a weapon to do an execution. Otherwise Cash will just attack with his fists, which won't do much good. There's a few types of weapons. There are the silent small weapons. These are your shivs, a plastic bag, handcuffs, wire, or glass fragment. These are silent, but when you kill with them, they go away. They're one-use weapons. There is the medium-sized weapons, your crowbars, machetes, etc. These are not quiet, however, you can use them as many times as you want. And then there is the distraction weapons / items, like a brick, someone's head, and even more. You can't kill with these, but it certainly helps in some areas, as you can make quite a loud noise with them. The last weapon in the game are firearms. These are pretty standard. Pistols, shotgun, and by the end of the game, an automatic weapon. Now, the shooting is a bit wonky in this game. On the PS2 version, you can free aim. However, you can't actually hit an enemy when you aren't locked on to someone. It's just not going to do anything. You have to be locked on to even hit them. If you're really close to somebody, you can lock onto their head and kill them like that. But to lock onto them to begin with, you actually have to be decently close. And that's the weapons of Manhunt. While there isn't an absolute ton of them in the game, they all serve a purpose, and there are certainly no bad weapons. I can definitely say that there is no bad weapons. Executing enemies is really the main thing you do in this game. It's that you want to get behind people, and you just want to waste them. Like I said earlier, the longer you hold down the button, the gorier the kill. Well, the execute button, of course. And while you could just tap the button to do a quick execution, you want to see those long ones. You want to see those gruesome executions. You want to see what happens. It piques human intrigue. You want to see the goriest ones. For instance, the quick execution with a crowbar is he just smashes someone's head, while the goriest one has him ripping the dude open with the crowbar. It's gruesome. Also, you get a better rank at the end of the level if you perform the gory kills. However, if you're spotted, an enemy rushes you. Cash has two options. You can either run or you can fight. Fighting is, well, questionable. You can do a heavy and light attack. You can even block by not pressing a button. It's about as janky as it looks, but that's really what Cash can do. He is very capable given his surroundings and can totally annihilate people with something as simple as a plastic bag. He is certainly capable. So let's talk about what you're actually doing in Manhunt besides executing people. In Manhunt, you are put in these really linear levels and are told usually to just kill everyone in the level. Now, Manhunt, like I said earlier, is a stealth game primarily, so you need to stay unseen and kill people in stealth. There are 3 levels of detection: unseen, suspicious, and spotted, each having a different color, but I'm colorblind, so yeah. Something huge about Cash is that he can hide in the dark. To the right of the screen you can see what Cash is doing, whether he's walking, running, picking something up, etc. Now when the icon fades to black, you're essentially invisible. Unless an enemy is actively chasing you, when that icon goes dark, they cannot spot you. When an enemy is chasing you, the icon flashes red actually. You want to hide in the shadows and wait for an enemy to have their back turned to you so you can of course execute them. There are a few other little wrinkles here as well. Like I mentioned, sound plays a big part. Running makes noise, killing people with loud weapons makes noise, but Cash himself can make a noise to lure enemies, like hitting a wall with the weapon he is equipped. This will cause enemies to come look at what just caused that sound. They will eventually decide it was nothing and go back. When enemies make noise, such as talking to themselves or walking, they show up on the minimap actually. That's very helpful. Now enemies will never go into dark areas on the map unless they are chasing you. They will just wait outside of it. They're actually smart enough to just not go in the dark area. In fact, I think it's time to talk about the AI in Manhunt. The AI in this game are not messing around. I am not exaggerating when I have to say that this is some of the most advanced AI I've ever seen in a stealth game, and it's surprising considering how old this game is. It is far superior to like anything you'd see in a modern game, except maybe like the new Hitman games. The AI are smart enough to investigate noise, won't go in dark areas that look hella sus, and the AI have some pretty good peripheral vision. It's not perfect, but it's really good actually. They can see you in the corner of their eye a lot of the time. It's quite surprising. They point out bodies from a far distance as well. However, you can hide them in the shadows, so that kind of gets rid of that. And good luck getting some of the enemies to separate each other, because that doesn't happen all the time. They'll stick together a lot of the time, and separating them can be hard. And when you're spotted, they don't just quickly lose sight of you and give up. No, they chase you down. These enemies are actually relentless, sometimes being as fast as the player. It can take a lot to get enemies to lose you. They really hunt you down. It's in the name of the game. Manhunt. The enemies in this game are just not messing around in the slightest. They look and sound crazy, but they have crazy good AI also. It leads to the game actually being difficult. Manhunt is actually a really challenging game, requiring strategy and patience. You have to wait for your opportunity to strike, lurk around in the shadows for a bit, and then when you have the opportunity, when it's provided to you, you get them one at a time. You sure as hell don't want to be fighting them head on is why, unless you have a gun. Yeah, eventually in Manhunt you get into Firefights. This is where the game becomes a pretty standard third-person shooter. It's a simple aim and shoot at the enemies, and they do the same. All that talk about how great the AI is just goes out the window once guns come available. They really just rush you. The game's tension goes drastically down during these firefights and becomes more standard. When you take damage, you'll have to find painkillers in these levels, but there is usually enough in each level to keep the game challenging. In terms of being a horror game, I more than think Manhunt is. It has one of the most unsettling atmospheres in any video game and is tense a majority of the game. The game is certainly horror, and while it doesn't have the most horror elements, the themes alone I would say make it a horror game. Besides executing people from the shadows and gunning people down, you'll occasionally be given a small other task, such as rescuing your family in one level and an escort mission twice. These are actually good, as they change up the pace even a little bit and are well developed, and they don't stray far enough from the main game. Or there's also just executing people. But that's the general gameplay of this, quote, murder simulator, is going around these 20 levels, being generally as stealthy as possible, executing people to get by, and getting in some firefights. When it comes to the graphics of Manhunt, I'm not going to come out and say they're fantastic or anything, but they get the job done, and I think that the art style that the game takes helps make the atmosphere even stronger. The game came out in 2003 for consoles primarily, so of course it's not going to be a powerhouse in the graphics department. I will just say that this game is really dark and is really ugly, but I think that's the way the graphics should be for it. For a game like this, it needs to be totally dark a majority of the game, and it needs to be ugly, and it needs to be dirty. And it needs to look rough, and when I mean it needs to look mean, it needs to look like you're in a shithole, and I think this game does that perfectly. While it doesn't look amazing for 2003, the textures are all perfect. The environment just gives off that amazing feeling, and it's not mind-blowing in the graphics department, it won't be wowing you, but it definitely gives off the right vibe. And yeah, majority of the game is dark and you really can't see a lot, but that's how it should be. In addition to this, the lighting is actually really well done. It's decently dynamic and clearly put down with care, especially considering how important the darkness is in this game. I love the special effects in this game. They're all presented to look like an old VHS tape. All the special effects, like those annoying ass lines or the rewind looking effect, I just love how that looks. When you kill people, it shows up and it looks great. Speaking of killing people, I guess it's time to look at the graphics at the killing side, if that makes any sense. And, well, it has aged a bit, but it is still very visceral and gory. The graphics when it comes to these executions are still gruesome, and when it came out, it was arguably the most gory game ever made next to Postal 2. Like, they show guts, bleeding, spleens coming out, eyeballs flying. It's pretty brutal, especially for the time. And nowadays, it won't exactly blow your mind, but it still looks pretty gross. It's violent, and I'll leave it at that. The character models as a whole are probably the most dated part of the entire game. They all look just fine. Nothing stands out here. Nobody looks particularly great. Cash is easily the best of them all. The animation is fluent enough, especially when you're killing people. That's great. There is some stuff that's in the animations that isn't exactly great. Some of them are stiff, but for the most part, it's good. The frame rate was perfect. I never had any issues the entire game, nothing to complain there. Overall, I'd say the graphics, while not, of course, amazing, they were really well done. The sound is just as good. I guess the first place to start would be the sound effects. They're downright disturbing. The way you kill people just sounds horrific. Hearing the chopping, the blunt weapon hitting someone's head, like dismantling someone's innards, it's pretty great stuff, and all the noises, especially when you kill people, just sound evil. There's no other way to put it. They just sound evil. It's some of the most realistic and just gruesome sound effects I've ever heard in a video game. All the weapons, evil. Every villain is lemons. I will say the guns do sound a bit generic, though. The voice acting is actually really well done. While Cash doesn't really say anything, it's the director that steals the show. His voice acting is really well done, and I have nothing but praise. He makes the game. The other people who talk are the gang members. These people just sound crazy, suspicious, cruel, all the above. They sound like they're full of hatred. It's pretty... Ooh, it made me generally feel uneasy, as the AI in this game, they were just creepy as hell. There was a real sticking point, and they really helped build up the atmosphere. It really did. And the music is just perfect. It doesn't try to be catchy. It doesn't try to be charming. No, it knows what it wants. It wants to be dark, dreary, and give off that old slasher flick vibe. It's really a step above. Like, it just helps the entire atmosphere. It's way better than atmospheric noise. It sets the mood. It sets the vibe. It really does. It's like, damn. The music is dynamic as well. Like, when an enemy spots you, it ramps up like crazy. When you're sneaking up on somebody and start killing them, it ramps up. It's a bit dynamic. And sure, the music isn't going to stick with you or anything, but I think it's perfect for this game. In fact, in general, the presentation and sound are just kind of perfect. They aren't perfect in the sense that they sound the best or look the best, but they just accomplish what they're going out for just incredibly well, and that is just setting the mood of this game. Its goal is to be unsettling and genuinely awful, and yeah, it's definitely that. It succeeds at that, and to me, that's a win. But now we're going to talk about the things that aren't wins. Manhunt has some issues. The first thing I'm going to bring up is the control. The controls in Manhunt are clunky. They take a while to get used to. The game controls slow, it's slower paced, and takes some time. Cash is not quick on his feet at all and takes time to do everything. Walking is not speed walking, interacting with the environment is not quick, and even turning can be sluggish. The game can feel very sluggish at times, and you can't do anything in a quick manner except run. It takes some time to get used to and can feel very clunky at first. Now, the part of the controls that really got me at first was the executions. So in Manhunt, to perform the execution, like I've always said, you got to get behind him and you got to get close enough, which makes sense. But you have to have Cash in the execution stance. If he isn't in that stance, he will just swing whatever weapon he's holding, alerting the enemy immediately that you're about to kill. I had this happen multiple times where I was about to kill him, but Cash did not get into the stance, and I just pressed the button prematurely and got spotted, which is quite annoying. Of course, as I played through the game, this was happening less and less, but at first I was pretty bad, and I was pressing the button prematurely a number of times. It is probably my fault, but it still is kind of jank. Eventually, though, I was able to get a hang of the controls and understand them quite well. I was able to understand the slow, methodical approach of Manhunt, and that you have to get into a certain animation. Something I never got a hang of is the combat when you get spotted. I never got the hang of it because it's awful. The hand-to-hand combat is just dog crap. You're just trading blows with the enemy until one of you dies. You just try to hit them before they can hit you. It's very poor. It's about as good as GTA 3's hand-to-hand combat. It's terrible. There's nothing good here. You could do like a weird grapple thing if you got good timing. That doesn't help. The combat just stinks. You want to avoid it as much as you can. And of course your answer will be, well, don't ever get spotted. But there are a few times that they do force you into this terrible combat. So yeah, it's easily the worst part of the whole game, is this combat. If you're fighting more than one enemy in combat, you will not win. It's that simple. They will kick your shit in. It's your punishment for getting spotted. Now this brings us to the shooting. The shooting is very lackluster. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're not locked on to the enemy, you will not hit anything. It's just that simple. The aiming reticle does nothing. You just kind of try to take cover and shoot them as fast as possible. You try to gun them all down as fast as you can before they kill you incredibly fast. The shooting feels very undercooked, it feels clunky, the guns don't feel anywhere near as good as the executions, and when you have a gun, a lot of the tension is gone. The horror elements just kind of disappear and it becomes a standard third-person shooter. In fact, I don't think it even becomes a standard third-person shooter, it becomes a subpar third-person shooter, because that's really what it is subpar, under average, and it's not of the highest quality. The AI doesn't provide much of a challenge either, so instead what Manhunt does is the tried and true formula of throw hella dudes at you, especially near the end of the game. Speaking of that, the game kind of dips in quality. The first half of the game I think is excellent, where it's basically all stealth based and you're moving through the shadows, killing one at a time. It's great stuff. Seeing these gory executions is very tense. However, after the halfway mark in almost every other mission, they give you guns at some point, and when you have these guns, like I mentioned, the tension is just gone, the gameplay becomes quite subpar, which is really unfortunate because that first half is great. I wish that more of the game was like the first half, and there are more missions where you're just being stealthy, as opposed to what we have where like every other mission has guns in the second half, and I just don't think the shooting is good enough to carry the game. If the whole game was this shooting, I'd say it'd probably be a pretty bad game, or at least mediocre. However, a majority of the game you are not blasting people, I will say. But those are really my only issues with Manhunt. I think what the game does, it does well. Like the atmosphere, the executions, the general stealth gameplay. However, it fumbles and trips a bit with some other aspects. But overall, I think the game, it's still actually quite good. It's not amazing or great, but it is still good. It's definitely unique, that's for sure. The game is also longer than most would anticipate, as there are 20 missions and each one takes anywhere from like 20 to 50 minutes to finish on a first time playthrough. You even get ratings based off of a few factors, and you can unlock a few secret levels, so I guess there is some replay. Now as a horror game, I think it more succeeds due to just like the nature of the premise alone. Rockstar really sent out a message with this game, and I think they delivered with it, with its great stealth mechanics, dark mood, and some of the most visceral kills of all time. Manhunt is a game I can recommend to everybody, provided you can stomach the idea of the game and the gore. I think it's worth a shot. Really, it is. While it isn't the best or mind-blowing or one of the best stealth games ever, I think the gore alone is a reason it should be tried. I mean, you should see if it resonates with you. It is a truly horrifying premise, honestly. And hey, you might hate it, but I'd still say try it. If you like stealth games, though, this is an easy recommendation if you need something different, or if you liked what you saw, instant pickup. The game is really cheap nowadays. It's on PS2, Xbox, and PC. It was also re-released on PS4 with trophies. Manhunt was a controversial game for a number of reasons, and we all know this. But that did not stop Rockstar from making a sequel. No, no, no. And the next time, for the end of the month, we're going to be looking at that sequel, Manhunt 2. So if you like this video, guys, like, share, sub, comment, dislike, whatever it is, that'd be all great. Have a wonderful Christmas.